I am talking to Crikey's Canberra correspondent, Bernard Keane. Now, Bernard, it's been called one of the closest elections in living memory. What do you think the chances are of a hung parliament?
At this stage, they look pretty good. We're waiting for the results from Western Australia to come in. If there's a sizable swing to the Libs there, that will probably deliver them enough seats to get over the line. But it needs to be a fairly solid swing. It needs to be 2 or 3%. So at this stage, it does look like there will be some sort of hung parliament, probably with the coalition in the lead, and probably best placed to form a majority government, given the inclinations of the most of the independents.
And so what does that actually mean, a hung parliament? Can you talk us through what that actually means?
Well, the first thing that will happen is the Governor-General will ask the sitting Prime Minister to actually see if she can form a government. If she can't, then turn to the opposition leader, who I think will be in a stronger position to do that. But what I think it means is that we're going to see a different type of politics in Australia, and that's a great thing. Because I think one of the reasons why this is such a close election is because voters are genuinely unhappy with what they're being offered from both sides of politics. Because of Australia's preferential voting system, they don't really have any, except in rare seats like Melbourne where a Green has got up. Basically their votes tend to flow back to the major parties. So this rise of the independents, there's going to be at least 4 in this parliament. There's talk of a 5th. And them sitting in a position of actually having the balance of power, I think, is going to change the way politics is conducted, and might make it. I think it's going to make it a whole lot more interesting, obviously, for the media, but also I think a lot more relevant for voters.
Yeah, you've talked about voters being disaffected. What particular issues do you think they're disaffected with, or policies?
I think they sense a real lack of leadership from both sides on key issues like. The biggest one, the one that's mentioned all the time, is climate change. That's one where both sides have actually retreated at a rate of knots from the commitments they actually took to the last election. And I think that's actually caused quite a bit of resentment amongst voters. Regardless of how they actually feel about the issue, I think they perceive that both parties are too scared to actually take a lead on that issue, and they've reacted against that. But as we've seen throughout the campaign, the whole national conversation between the major political parties and voters is a very sterile one. They're focused on issues like the major parties are focused on pork barrelling, they're focused on a small number of swinging voters, and they're certainly not addressing key issues that are really should be on the agenda for Australia, like housing supply, where there are big problems, like infrastructure, again where there are major problems, and instead they've been replaced with these confected issues like the so-called problems of our budget deficit, which are absolutely minuscule, and asylum seekers.
Now, you've talked about leadership. Given you've said that it's likely there'll be a hung parliament, what do you think the chances are of Labor going through another leadership change?
Julia Gillard was hired to win this election, and if she fails to do it, I think that means all bets are off. The problem is, though, who's got the sufficient profile to actually step up and replace it. Labor finds itself in uncharted waters. It's never been certainly not for 70 or 80 years, been a one-term government. What do you do after a one-term government? What do you do after you've chucked out a hitherto very, very popular Prime Minister because his polls have dived, and then only to discover you can't actually fix things? So I think there'll be a lot of soul-searching in Labor. The problem is not so much the leader for Labor. The problem is the factional power brokers, the backroom boys, who were behind the move to replace Kevin Rudd with Julia Gillard. Really, it should be their heads that are on the chopping block, not Julia Gillard's, but politics doesn't work that way.
Bernard Keane, thanks very much for talking to us.